we are seeing a bit of an unexpected challenge confronting OpenAI. The pace of improvement in their core AI technology might be slowing down. We got a report this past week from The Information that the company's upcoming flagship model, which is codenamed Orion, is kind of revealing the limitations of current AI development approaches. So The Information is reporting that while Orion does appear to surpass previous models, the improvement is notably smaller than the big leap we saw between GPT-3 and GPT-4. And some OpenAI employees report that Orion just isn't consistently better at certain tasks, even particularly coding, despite higher operational costs. So this basically is starting to challenge one of the fundamental assumptions in AI that we've talked about a bunch, which is scaling laws. The systems will continue to improve at a consistent rate given more data in compute. And it seems like that data piece could be the bottleneck here. They are reporting that the amount of high quality training data is creating a real struggle for OpenAI. Apparently, they have largely exhausted their publicly available text and data sources. They've started to experiment with AI generated training data, but this is creating complexity. The Information is reporting that Orion sometimes mimics the limitations of the older models used to generate its training data. So in response, OpenAI is trying a couple things, it sounds like. They have established a dedicated foundations team led by Nick Ryder to address the data shortage and explore the future of AI scaling. They're also looking more at post-training improvements, like developing new reasoning models like O1 that take more time to think before providing answers. So, Paul, I guess my first and biggest question is, are we actually slowing down here?
Yeah, this is fascinating. So I don't feel like anything in this article was new, but this thing was cooking on Twitter over the weekend. Like everyone was reacting to this. There was a bunch of OpenAI employees responding to it. So the co-founder and CTO at Writer, which is a Gen AI writing platform that we're very familiar with. He tweeted, "We've been discussing this for some time. There's minimal improvement or return beyond a trillion parameters, with only very small gains from around 150 billion to 1 trillion. We have publicly stated that our Palmera LLM achieves improvements by deepening the model architecture, not by increasing the number of parameters." Um, but then you had other people like Clive Chan from OpenAI. He's like, what it comes next is relatively little new science, but instead years of grinding engineering to try all the new obvious ideas and the new paradigm, scale it up, speed it up. Maybe there's another wall after this one, but for now there's 10X's as far as the eye can see. So he's like, just the headline's misleading basically. You had Dan Schipper, who's a co-founder and CEO at Every. The message that this headline conveys is at odds with what people inside the big labs are actually feeling, saying. It's technically correct, but the takeaway for the casual reader, AI progress is slowing, is exactly the opposite of what I'm hearing. We have Adam.GPT, who's an OpenAI employee, said traditional scaling laws, which focus on pre-training larger models for longer, is absolutely still a thing. That aspect of scale is still foundational. There now happens to be another scaling thing, and together those two things are poised to unlock amazing capabilities. Noam Brown, who's fundamental to the O1 model, we've talked about Noam multiple times. He said there won't be a slowdown in AI progress anytime soon. So, and then like ironically, Sam Altman did an interview with Gary Tan from Y Combinator. And this is last week. We'll put the interview in the show notes. I was watching it on YouTube. I don't know if it's a podcast too or not, but it's definitely on YouTube. And Sam said these things are going to compound. We could hit some unexpected wall or we could be missing something, but it looks like there's a lot of compounding in front of us. We are not near the saturation point. The models are going to get so much better so quickly. And when Gary asked him, what are you excited about in 2025? He said AGI. So I don't know. So I think like there was a couple of things I went back to on this because again, the article, I guess maybe it was more explicitly saying that it thinks the labs have run into a plateau on the scaling laws.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's new because like we talked recently about Ilya Sutskever, And he was talking about the need to like how these labs all know to do like more data, more training time, but that there needs to be some new paths where you push hard, and that the challenge a lot of these labs were facing was which new path to bet on. That there was different ways now to go about trying to drive like these leaps forward. But
Hmm.
the thing we talked about, I can't remember what episode it was on. We'll have to go back and look. We'll put it in the show notes. But what I said was, it might have been when we first talked about Orion, that the thing that to me was the $1 trillion question was, could OpenAI create a new frontier model that stayed at the top of the leaderboard for another 2 years?
Hmm.
Because when they introduced GPT-4 in March of 23, um, everybody chased that model since then. And and it seems like everybody just sort of caught up to that. Like no one is clearly ahead of a GPT-4, GPT-4o model, but they're all sort of comparable. And so the question became, well, why hasn't someone taken a leap yet? Is it because the training in this way is just kind of like, this is it, this is the smartest models we get? The investments coming from big tech certainly didn't imply that. The demand for NVIDIA chips certainly didn't imply that.
Hmm.
So the unknown was, well, has OpenAI or has anybody else cracked the next breakthrough that allows them to create a model that is so far ahead of everybody else, like GPT-4 was? And that's the part that seems up in the air at the moment. Now, as we talked about last week, OpenAI seems to think reasoning is the key, that their
Hmm.
series of O1 models. And again, I'm a believer that we're going to get the full O1 sometime between November 21st, when I think that there's a developer day, an OpenAI developer day, and November 30th, when we would be at the 2 year anniversary.
Anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, did I get my numbers right? Yeah. 2 year anniversary of ChatGPT coming out. So I think we're going to get the O1 full model. Now, what it's capable of doing beyond what we already see, I'm not sure. Um, but I think that there is a real question here about whether or not these frontier models are sort of commoditized at this point, that they have somewhat plateaued in they're just going to keep leapfrogging each other every 3 to 6 months. And there isn't a breakthrough really left at that model of text in and text out. But where I think this becomes interesting is like, what are the things that are going to differentiate as we move forward?
Hmm.
And the things that seem, because Demis Hassabis has said the same thing, that there's like 2 to 3 breakthroughs left before we just get to AGI. And reasoning seems to be a big one, like that everybody's working on that. And so O1 is sort of the first one to market that has that clearly, but we know everybody else is working on it. Multimodal seems to be really critical. So again, keep in mind, a lot of these previous generation models were text in, text out. So they were trained on the text of the internet. They were not trained on videos, audio, images as a single model. But we know that's what Google is trying to do with Gemini, that you train it on multimodal. And then that opens up a whole new universe of data to train these models on. And maybe that's a path to go down, is pushing hard on the training there. The other one that comes to mind to me is the path. And maybe these are some of the things Ilya's thinking about when he's saying like there needs to be, you got to pick which path to bet on. So you could bet on reasoning, you could bet on multimodal training. You could bet on symphony of models where the frontier model functions as the conductor, and then all the smaller models do their thing within specialized areas that don't require as much compute. And so you can imagine pushing hard on this sort of like central hub, which is the frontier model, and then all of this symphony that allows them to kind of work in collaboration together. And then the other one where Google has the massive advantage is self-play and recursive self-improvement. And that comes from reinforcement learning, like AlphaGo and AlphaZero and things like that. And so those are four. Again, I have no idea what the next breakthroughs are, but from everything I've heard in these interviews, they seem to think they know the collection of things it could be.
Hmm.
And what they need to now do is push compute, push different testing, and see which of these things plays out to unlock these frontier models to maybe then take the leap And maybe it's like a couple of these things in combination. But all that being said, for our listeners, this is all fascinating. But for our listeners, here's the reality. It's irrelevant to you if they make a leap forward next year. Like, they probably will. But from what Mike and I see every day talking to big enterprises and small, is the absorption of the current capabilities is so low. The value you can create in your company using today's models is so significant and
Mhm.
so untapped that it doesn't really matter. Like, do we get GPT-5 or Gemini 2 or Claude 4, or did their training runs not work? Like, it's all fun to talk about. But for you, focus on using what we have today to do your plans for next year, to build a more efficient team, to drive productivity and creativity and innovation. Like, the next main topic, Mike and I are going to share a way we did this, but like, that's my main message to you is don't get caught up worrying about all this stuff. Just go do things, like
Yeah.
take action, because there's so much value sitting there to be created with the models we already have.
And realistically, we don't need that many more breakthroughs for there to be even more disruption, right? I mean, even if it's not as big a leap next time forward, these are still improving. The
Yeah.
models are still improving. We're just debating like how much.
Yeah. I think the fusion of the current capabilities would be enough disruption to last us like 5 years.
Yeah.
So they're going to get smarter. They're going to get more generally capable. They're going to be able to take actions. They're going to do all these things we talk about, have worldviews, things like that. But that stuff may not create value for your company for another year or two. What we have today can transform your company right now.